Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am one of your hosts, Bryant, with my permanent guest, Cammy. Hey, Cammy.
Hey, Bryant.
What's going on?
Just spooking it up for Halloween.
Getting it up. I'm super spooky. I got Sudafed in me, ibuprofen. It's spooky. Uh, Cammy, it's been a wonderful October. We're on 3 of 3 so far. We've been hitting movie themed. That's the theme, right? Yeah, because
Yeah,
typically
pretty
we've had a
much.
theme every October. So move like spookiness based on movies, with some poltergeist, haunted house, and this one's a little broader. Maybe not. Yeah, how would you describe
I
this?
would say it's not broader than haunted house, really, but it
Sure, good point.
maybe than poltergeist for sure. But it's slashers, so slasher
Right.
films, classic slasher films.
Yes, which is still, oh man. So Cammy gives us a story. She's got a nice story, and then I'll kind of lead a discussion. Uh, it was cool getting like a history lesson on the cinema and how many graduate papers were done on this topic and books and how much analysis is done. It's really fascinating. So again, Cammy will lead or will give us a story, and then I'll give the discussion. Cammy, why don't you take it away?
Absolutely. So I used the Wikipedia page, The Hook, and also the Texarkana Murder Mystery from Texas Monthly by Prudence McIntosh. In the county of Bowie, Texas, just outside the Arkansas line, the Overlook was a popular place for couples to go after a movie or dinner. It was a secluded spot on top of a cliff which overlooked the town, hence the name. There isn't much else to do in a small place like this. One such couple started their date out at the local diner and then went to see the latest Scream movie and found themselves, at the end of the night, driving to the Overlook. On the way, the two were playing the radio and talking about what could possibly be in store next for Sidney Prescott and which Scream had been their favorite in the franchise when the announcer came on. It was close to Halloween, so he was talking about the spooky history of their town. The Overlook had been a popular makeout spot since the 1940s. The announcer rambled a bit about some old town lore of a killer who frequented that place years ago. The DJ said he was rejected by his lover, who found another to marry. So the jilted man started taking his revenge on every happy couple he could find parked at the Overlook. He was a butcher by trade, so he would use a meat hook to break the car windows and stab the couples where they sat. The two girls began to kiss, but they heard a faint scratching at their roof. One of the girls gets out, but sees nothing in the darkness and decides it was something on the radio to enhance the ambiance of their story. They began to kiss again, but they heard the same noise on the side of the car. They turned the radio down and continued, but just then they heard a loud bang against the rear window. They screamed and threw the car into reverse. They didn't stop until they were at a well-lit filling station. The two got out of the car, no scratches on the side and the tops of the vehicle. Then they walked to the back. Dangling from the rear windshield wiper was a meat hook. The couple, too startled to speak, calmly got back into the car and turned up the radio. They caught the announcer saying, "This just in, the Overlook killer has escaped. He's considered to be armed and dangerous. Do not approach. Please lock your doors and alert authorities if you see or hear anything suspicious." Ooh.
Do you remember? I think it was last episode I told you about how Community, the NBC show, had a Halloween episode where they were like
Yeah, I
describing
do.
the that was like that story is like one of the ones that they describe. But it's Britta who's like not fun. She's a great character, but that like part of her character development is that she's increasingly like a a buzzkill, and she tries to. It's great. It was like listening to her tell the story, but because it's you, it was actually a good story. It was wonderful.
Oh.
If anyone knows what I'm talking about, they're gonna go, yeah. So
Well,
yeah,
she's named after a water filter, so
I
I don't
know.
know.
Yeah, her parents were something wrong with her parents. That is like a good quintessential like story of that the hook hand
You
in
know,
hand.
the interesting thing, so
Mhm.
this story is it's not really based on a true story per se,
Huh?
but a lot of the details that are in this urban legend are very similar to to a murderer that existed in Texarkana, which is where I got the story from. So I read the real
Oh, sure.
story of what happened, and then I read the Wicca as well.
Oh, no, that's great. That's really great. Um, so, I wanted to kind of look and see if there is like, I just kind of went with broad Googles of like slasher genre and mythology, that kind of thing. And there's not any particularly there. I got a ton. Oh man, because of it is Halloween, and because there's these great new, continuations of lots of old films and new ones like that Smile one. I keep getting ads for that Smile one whenever I'm on these websites that are talking about it. Um, and they list. So I found there's like a bunch of websites. I think half of them just copied and pasted each other, but the one I stuck with was cbr.com, and it had like a list of 10 horror movies inspired by myth. They were all lists. Everyone loves lists.
Right.
And it was cool though, because I I know that you aren't quite into horror movies. Like, you don't seek them. I don't necessarily seek them either. I like them when they're a little smarter. Like, we were talking about how much we enjoy Cabin in the Woods, but that's like has comedy in it and other, it's a meta.
Yeah, it definitely breaks the fourth wall throughout the entire movie.
Right. But this one did list some really cool ones. So like there was a movie called Antlers that had the Wendigo. Llorona was a great film based off of a mythological spirit from Latin American folklore. Of course, Headless Horseman, Sleepy Hollow. We've talked about a couple of these. Vampires came up. Leprechauns, Krampus, which is great. One that was cool, like, was this. There was a horror movie called Urban Legend, where
Oh yeah.
I had never heard of this film. And the murderer uses urban legends to kill. And I was like, oh, that's great, because we've had our little side segments, urban legends, where we would talk about that. And there was a few other great ones. One was called The Ritual. Actually, it was based in Norse mythology. Another one called Troll Hunter was as well. That's really cool. So a lot of horror movies are using myth today, but it's kind of like, it doesn't seem like they haven't really, like, it didn't really start that way necessarily. They're kind of spinning them. But so what made these films, the rise of slasher films and things like that, it's actually pretty cool. It stems from old films, especially in the 50s and 60s, with two specific genres: German krimi, or like criminal, with a K, films, and Italian cinema, a genre called giallo, which is yellow. But it's
Oh, okay.
yeah, you're gonna see it, Giallo.
I did see that. Like I
Yeah.
did see that when I was reading.
It's like giallo. It's not giallo or whatever. But yeah. So those two, and people like Wikipedia, Britannica, and a few other websites that are copying them for their online articles. They kind of Yallo, Italian yellow, that's like the kind of the core of these, but a lot mention the German krimi as well, and specifically the German krimi because they were inspired by these British mystery films, or books, excuse me, that were eventually changed into like they were based off of that. So these, like, the idea basically that these films did then and what now is, like, they were based off of, like, especially the criminal films. That's what I really liked reading about, because they're based on these books, which reminded me a lot of like Agatha Christie stuff, which was written after that. The big thing about them is there's like a mystery, and in them it's a criminal mystery. So there's a murderer, and you don't know who the murderer is. And I'm like, that's basically what all horror movies are at their core,
Yeah.
in a sense. And I was just like, oh my gosh, and it just kind of like a light bulb came on in my head. And what the Yalo films did was they did that, but they included sort of the goriness and had
Mm.
some eccentric characters. There was like an unknown guy who would literally like cut you and stuff like that. So these,
Oh, like Evil Within? Is that a movie or a game?
that was the video game. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool because, like, it was sort of like an evolution. Like, there's like a line of Agatha Christie that leads up to the new Halloween movie with Jamie Lee Curtis. Like, it's this weird, like, Proto-Indo-European language, like, tree of films that starts off with mysteries, and that totally makes sense. But it, of course, it started to stem and stem and stem and stem, and like, later, like my notes kind of and what Wikipedia talks about is when we get into things like American Psycho, that goes into a whole new sort of thing that I really enjoyed. One thing I found was this old Reddit thread that someone they asked the question in this 8 months ago. I thought it was 8 years ago. It was actually not too long ago. So this person, Bo Bell, I'll link it in the podcast because it was pretty cool. They asked the question, why is the mythological boogeyman slasher genre an American phenomenon? And someone, I can't even really pronounce their name. I'm sorry, their username. They had a really great point though, that they said advances in information gathering and analysis by the FBI created a brand new monster for the 1970s, the serial killer. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. This is just sort of their conjecture. I'm sure that it could be just some research and stuff like that, but it totally makes sense because these criminals do sort of like the when it goes from the Crimmy and the Yellow films to like straight up horror, like with Alfred Hitchcock, Psycho, and stuff like that. There is we get these single guys like the Michael Myers, and even like when we go into the supernatural ones like Freddy Krueger and stuff. But yeah, it totally takes that serial killer thing, but that kind of like became a thing because of the FBI. So I thought that was a really interesting point that this user made
Can you
regarding that.
spell their name, or is it
Yeah,
just like inappropriate?
No.
Okay.
Espa Mesa. There we go.
Okay.
I will link the thread in, so you can read it yourselves. I'll put it in the show notes on YouTube and on podcast stuff, Pinecast,
Sure.
all that. So yeah, and so from that like discussion, it's really cool to see. Cammy sent me some links. There's a great book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws, by Carol Clover that came out in '92. That it looks at the culture. It's a critique of culture and looks into like the use of gender in the films and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is that there's the final girl trope, which has its own Wikipedia page too. It's funny because like the final girl, you'd think it's about like the sadisticness of the killer, which in like American Psycho it is like he that's the main character, but like
Mm-hmm.
with the final girl scenario, the final girl is kind of the main character in a
Like
way,
Sidney Prescott in Scream.
and she 100%
No,
is,
no
yeah.
spoilers.
Right, yeah, sorry. But yes, yeah, that's a really great way to put it. So
Or
it's
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yep,
And
Jamie Lee Curtis, 100%. Yeah,
Halloween,
like
yeah.
them, and like what's crazy too is just like how like in some of these cases they're the ones that like aren't the sexually loose ones. They're the ones that are more reserved. So it's is it like a
You're
reward?
rewarded for your
Virtuousness, yeah.
That's interesting because Cabin in the Woods plays with that so much. It's
Exactly, and
the
they require they need the virgins and the non they need both. They need both. Like
right.
each person has a role. Yeah, Cabin in the Woods, you got to watch that. That's such a great film. Really, really, really funny. So yeah, I just there's a really great way to see that Wikipedia's write up on the slasher film. It does a great job of simplifying it for me again because I'm not like super into these films. I remember like when I worked retail, like there was a family that loved like it was like a full family, husband, wife, multiple kids, and they would all watch these movies together and stuff, and they would wear the shirts, and they loved this stuff, and I was just so jealous of them, and it was just like such a cultural icon for them. And they didn't just like it for like their simpleness, like I don't know. It was they
Wait,
could
which
see
movies?
more
Was it just horror movies in general or like
in general.
specific? Oh, okay.
In general, yeah. In general, they were just totally into them. Um, so and they were up on the history of it too. And I mean, it's crazy to see. There's like the original, then there's like the neo slashers, then there's the modern, and then there's this, and then like it just goes off into these multiple things. When I had kind of looked at it more simply,
Yeah, Scream really started its own genre of
right.
stuff too because it didn't take itself as seriously as
Yeah.
previous slashers had taken themselves.
Right, and then that formed a whole genre of like being a complete farce,
Right.
of
Oh
just
yeah, like Scary
things.
Movie and
Right. So this is like a wonderful spectrum, and it's deeper than like I gave it credit for or than I recognized it for. So that was that was just really interesting, and I'm glad that we took the time to do that to look at this and so I could discover that again. Like when I realized like the Crimmy films, these bad guys, I was like, it makes sense. It's a mystery and there's a villain and he's killing people, but like it just wasn't, that wasn't the kind of the point of it. It was about it was almost James Bondian, like
Right.
that's what kind of flipped me out. Is it's like we're one like angle away from being James Bond or a horror film if we
I
perspective.
was thinking about that when we started talking about
Mm.
slasher, because what really is the difference from a horror movie and just any movie
Yeah,
with
it's
a killer
the
or
way you
with something? Yeah, it's the way you tell it.
tell it. Yeah. Wow. This is enlightening.
It is enlightening.
All right, I'm essentially done with my conversation. I'll leave you with one huge enlightening fact. And I'm going to ask you this, Cammy, and you've got to guess. I'll give you a
Oh
hint if you can't
no.
get it right.
I hate getting
Um
things wrong.
Michael Myers,
Uh-huh.
the horror guy, not Canadian actor. Both very scary.
Okay.
He wears a mask and he's coming at you. He's going to get you, Jamie Lee Curtis. His mask is actually a prop mask that was made from an actor. What actor?
I do know who this is, but I don't. It's it's
You can
Kirk. It's
Yes, it's
Captain
William
Kirk. But
Shatner.
yeah, William Shatner. Yeah, I couldn't remember his name.
Oh, I'm glad you knew that. Yeah, I feel like that would be like a wonderful trivia that like most people would know. So I laughed, and then I can't stop seeing it now.
I know. Yeah, like I remember when I found that out, it was like, God, it's almost funny at this point.
Now the real question is like, does he get money? Do you think Shatner was able to like
For every
seriously
movie,
his
and every time
likeness?
it's streamed.
I'm curious if like they would get in front of that and be like, "Yo, before you say something, here's a percentage check based off of the films." Because
That would be so interesting to find out if he's ever. I mean, maybe he doesn't care because I'm sure he seems decent. Like he doesn't seem like
sure,
too much of a jerk. So he might just be like whatever. But at the same time, they're making a lot of money. So I mean, why
maybe they
not get a
sold
cut
the
of it?
mask for like $60, and that's what he took. And he's like,
Right.
"Brr."
Yeah.
"Man, I should have done a little bit more." So no, that was great. Yeah, that is essentially my discussion. Wikipedia did like have a history kind of thing. It was all like the history of the film genre, but it did say like appeals of violence go all the way back to ancient Rome. That was it. That's all they said. That
It goes beyond ancient Rome.
no
Are you kidding me?
footnotes.
You want to
Yeah,
stop at ancient Rome 2,000 years ago is when you want to stop?
that's what made me laugh. I was like, Mesopotamians, they were happy. They didn't
I
fight
mean,
Egyptians.
like screw civilization. Like,
Right.
I mean, people are violent. People have
Right.
always been violent.
Right. Yeah. So I that made me laugh, and I guess like it is a different sort of discussion. And when you're looking up slasher stuff, you're not typically looking at that end. And I'm sure I could have done some deep dives, found some like JSTOR articles. I think it's pretty obvious, yeah, that like we have many old sources the talk about death and defeat. I mean, what we just said about a horror movie is just a story with a villain who does bad things, and just how you take it. Like you could make a horror movie out of like the Odyssey,
Oh,
like
for sure, for sure.
the sirens. Like, oh god,
Right.
that could be terrifying.
Or Odysseus might be the bad guy.
All right, don't blow my mind 2 times in one podcast, please. No, so really fun to look into this. I hope you guys are enjoying the 3 episodes that we've had featured on this stuff. I think it's kind of been a fun ramp up from like a specific topic to like a broader and then slightly even more broader topic. So tell us what your favorite slasher film is. Tell us one that like if it's unique too. I don't I don't know if I could bring myself to like watch all the Halloween films or something like that. I remember I've seen a couple of them, but it's all on like FX 3,
Sure.
when I was a kid.
Yeah, and like
So
probably the weird ones or
washed
whatever.
down, yeah. But if you got one
You
that you
should
really
definitely
like,
watch Scream 3. Like, I think you'd
yeah,
like it because Scream started that whole genre that we were
hmm
talking about of like it's a scary movie, and it's definitely a scary movie, but it it's almost meta in its approach.
sure,
It knows it's a scary movie.
that's cool.
Scream 2, just continuation of that. Scream 3 really takes it to another level. They're actually like the characters exist, and then there's also this other world because they're filming a movie based on the characters. So each character has a counterpart. So it's even
It's really
more
cool.
meta. Like it's insane. Like it's so good.
I didn't
Scream
know
3
that.
is just genius. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I don't know that everybody will agree with me. A lot of people
Mhm.
probably won't. But yeah.
If you don't agree with Cammy, tell us why. Or if you do. No, that's great. I will I think The Mist, I barely remember it. That was a Stephen King one. I remember watching that with one of my best friends a long time ago about the killer mist having
Oh,
that.
yeah, and then there was another movie called The Fog that was very similar to that,
Oh yeah,
if I remember correctly, yeah.
yeah. Well, I think that covers it. Unless you've got anything you want to add today, Cammy.
No, I think that's it. I'm just excited for next week as well.
Yes, yeah, we should have a big episode to round out October. So stay tuned. But of course, let us know what you'd like us to talk about for the rest of the year. Mythstorie with an IE, all one word, at gmail.com, or our Facebook group. We just had a bunch of people join. Thanks for coming in, everyone. I think we will see you next time.
Oh.